we are ready to start the 6th session of our 2-day conference on Atisa Dipankara Srijana. Session 6 is on Vinaya or monastic discipline, though the panelists will explain more about the concept. Our moderator is Venerable Geshe Lhakdor, and our panelists are Venerable Tenzin Lekzom from the Jamyang Choling Institute, Venerable Dhardo Tulku from Drepung Monastery, and Venerable Jamphel Thinley from Loselling Monastery. May I request all the panelists to please take their seats on the dais.
No, हमने बोला ना ये विनय है ना तो ज़्यादा दरबार गया सब
Allow me to briefly introduce our moderator and panelists. Venerable Geshe Lhakdor currently serves as director of the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, Dharamshala. He is also co-director of Science for Monks and a trustee for the Foundation for Universal Responsibility, contributing to global dialogues on ethics, education, and Buddhist philosophy. We are deeply honored that Venerable Geshe Lhakdor is moderating this session. Venerable Tenzin Lekzom was the moderator for the last session, so with her gracious permission, since she has already been introduced, we will move on to the other panelists. Welcome, Venerable Tenzin Lekzom. Venerable Dhardo Tulku, Venerable Dhardo Tulku Rinpoche was born in Kalimpong, India, and recognized as the 14th incarnation of Dhardo Rinpoche by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama in 1995. In 2000, he joined Drepung Loselling Monastic University, undertaking rigorous training in Buddhist philosophy. Having studied the 5 great treatises and completed the monastic curriculum, he is now in the final year of the Geshe Laram degree, the highest academic qualification in Buddhist philosophy. Alongside his scholarly pursuits, Rinpoche serves as head Lama of Ghum Ganden Yiga Choling, the oldest monastery in Darjeeling, founded in 1850. Welcome, Venerable Dhardo Tulku. Venerable Jamphel Thinley was born in Tibet and brought up in exile. He did his schooling from TCV and joined Drepung Loselling Monastery under the guidance of the late His Excellency Khensur Thuptop Gonpo. Jamphel received his bhikshu ordination from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Pursuing a Geshe Larampa degree, he has completed the study of Prajna Paramita, Madhyamaka, and Vinaya, and is at present studying Abhidharma. Over to you, Geshe Lhakdor. Thank you.
Hello. I welcome the young shooting stars. I'll not stand between you and the shooting stars. So I will right away invite Venerable Tenzin Lekzom to make her presentation. And you all know you have 20 minutes, not more than that.
So good afternoon. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a nice tea session. So we're going to delve now into the part of Atisha's life related to Vinaya. And I was talking to a few people during the morning tea, actually, and especially a lot of the lay people had not heard much about Vinaya before. So I'm going to try to explain a little bit in general about what Vinaya is in brief, as well as just for everyone's information. And then we'll also try to delve into Atisha's life in particular and how Vinaya related to his life. So Atisha occupies an important position in Buddhist history for his restoration of ethical thought. And he was very renowned for having an unwavering commitment to moral conduct, right? Being very careful with how he practiced and how he behaved with his body, speech, and mind. And the practice of Vinaya was central to his life, and he remained a model of strict ethical conduct throughout his life. And arriving in Tibet in the 11th century, he also re-established the integrity of Buddhist ethical and monastic practice that had declined following periods of political upheaval and doctrinal confusion. And central to Atisha's reform was his emphasis on ethical conduct and the Vinaya for monastics as an indispensable foundation of the Buddhist path. So this isn't to say that, when we talk about Vinaya, it's mainly for monastics, right? So, when Atisha was emphasizing that Vinaya was important for the path, it wasn't saying that lay people couldn't practice. That's not the point. But specifically for monastics, the importance of practicing Vinaya well. And Atisha studied the texts of multiple Vinaya traditions, so Mahasamgika, Staviravada, Samhitaya, and Sarvashtivada, and respected them all as genuine Vinaya traditions of the Buddha. So today I will examine Atisha's contributions to the development and transmission of the Vinaya, and his non-partisan approach to monastic discipline and the enduring impact of his ethical vision on the formation of Indian and Tibetan Buddhist moral philosophy. So he was, born into a royal family. A few of our speakers have gone through his life story earlier, and he renounced his, royal lineage, his worldly life at an early age to pursue monastic training. And we hear of this in Drontompa's praise of Atisha that says, without attachment to sensory pleasures, he left the wealth of royalty and became a bhikshu of the Mahasamgika school. I supplicate, glorious Atisha. So at the age of 29, he received ordination in the Mahasamgika Vinaya lineage under the master Shilarakshita at Bodh Gaya. And following ordination, he studied at the great Indian monastic universities of Vikramashila Mahavirahara as well as Odantapuri Mahavirahara, and remained a model of strict Vinaya practice and ethical conduct throughout his life. Atisha also traveled widely across India to study under different masters. So at Vikramashila, Atisha primarily studied the Vinaya of the four root schools, the Mahasamgika, Staviravada, Samhitaya, and Sravastivada. And, each had its own slightly different different features, right? And Atisha was really a scholar. His erudition spanned the entire Buddhist composition collection, including the Vinaya, Sutra, Tantra, Madhyamika, and Abhidharma texts as well. And this broad and comprehensive education that he had received from many teachers allowed him to integrate diverse teachings into a cohesive approach to spiritual development. And soon Atisha became renowned as a real scholar and known for his deep understanding of the Buddhist path and his ability to synthesize complex teachings into practical guidance for spiritual growth. So I'm going to speak a little bit about Vinaya in general because I got a lot of questions during morning tea, and I'm just going to speak about it in brief just to give you a basic general knowledge about it. So Atisha was known to act with uncompromising moral caution, right, viewing ethical purity as indispensable to genuine spiritual attainment. So when we talk about, Vinaya, right, it's usually defined as the Buddhist monastic code of ethics, and it is one of the three baskets or Tripitaka of the teachings of the Buddha. with the other two being Sutra and Abhidharma. And the Vinaya, the corpus of disciplinary rules governing monastic conduct, forms the structural and moral foundation of the Buddhist Sangha. The scriptures explain that for a country to be considered a central land where the Dharma flourishes, the four categories of disciples of the Buddha, lay men, upasaka, lay women, upasika, bhikshus and bhikshunis must exist. And since we appreciate the Dharma and we hope it will remain for a long time, it is therefore important to ensure that these four groups continue to exist. So just before the Buddha went into his parinirvana, right? Before his parinirvana, in the sutra on the vows of individual liberation, Pratimoksha Sutra, he states, "After I am gone, the vows of individual liberation will act as your teacher." And he stated that by taking these vows, guarding them well and not letting them degenerate, it will be like he himself is there. And when the Buddha became enlightened and started ordaining monastics, his instruction for the Sangha, and I think which really captures the essence of the Vinaya and practicing the Vinaya precepts, is contained in the following statement: guard your speech well, purify your mind, avoid all negativities of the body, purify the actions of all three. Doing all of this is the path of the great sage. And so the Vinaya is really a basis of developing concentration, wisdom, bodhicitta, and other realizations of the path. And so all naturally negative actions, things that we all of us know, even outside of the Buddhist Dharma, right? Actions such as killing and stealing and lying, all of these are a hindrance to the path of liberation. And from a Buddhist context, we say that because they result in unfortunate rebirths in future lives. So following ethical discipline as taught in the Vinaya eliminates hindrances caused by unwholesome behavior, and it also establishes a firm foundation for gaining the higher realizations on the path. So it is important to remember that all of these rules and the monastic code, when we hear about this, it's not a set of restrictive rules that the Buddha imposed of us that must be followed out of pressure, right? It's not out of force or pressure or to kind of, keep you constrained, right, within these rules. But it's actually due to his great kindness and wisdom, right? Knowing what sentient being needs to tame their body, speech, and mind. And these guidelines aim to help monastics control their body, speech, and minds and live harmoniously in community. And the Vinaya rules should not be thought as rules that cause restriction, but rather as a way to tame and discipline our minds. And also, as monastics, we're not always perfect either, right? So every 2 weeks, monastics also perform a confession ceremony called posada to purify and restore their precepts. And the Buddha taught this because he knew that monastics are not always perfect from the beginning. It's not like when we become monastics, we become enlightened. That's not the case, right? We still have ignorance in our minds. So we need to keep trying and practicing, right? So the Buddha knew this, and understanding that we are not perfect enlightened beings, but rather still on the process of developing, the precepts help monastics gradually tame their body, speech, and mind. And so the approach to practice the Vinaya is a natural one, neither being too strict nor too lax, and avoiding these extremes. Each monastic must find for him or herself a balanced way to practice. At the end of the Pratimoksha Sutra, there are also guidelines for ending disputes among members of the monastic community. In the monastic code, the Vinaya, they also have guidelines on how to resolve conflicts and how to respect all beings. And the Vinaya teaches us how to behave in a humble way and how to be satisfied with few things. And then, so rather than try to procure something or develop more attachment, monastics need to cultivate patience and be satisfied with the situation that it is. So really, in fact, if we really understand Vinaya deeply, we can see the entire path of liberation in it as well. There are many different types of monastic rules, and Atisa refrained from even the smallest rules as well, right? Let alone the major ones. So even in minor matters, Atisa was known to act with uncompromising moral caution, viewing ethical purity as indispensable to genuine spiritual attainment. So accounts of his life also illustrate the rigor of this ethical vigilance. So for example, he would not eat flour that had been stored in a clay pot. And And the reason for this is at the time, clay pots were also used for fermenting beer, right? Alcohol. And the Mahasamgika, they practiced abstaining from alcohol very strictly. So even if there were no leftover beer in the pot, there was still a possibility that there may be some remnants. So he avoided the use of clay pots. So I was going to show you some photos, yes. So here are some pictures from some of the murals, right? Images from Thailand, and it really shows monastics. And also, you can see on the bottom picture there, we have the fourfold Sangha depicted with the lay men, lay women, and bhikshus and bhikshunis as well. Also, I wanted to share with you, you may have noticed in the exhibition upstairs, this stupa, right, that is very famous. So it is said that Atisa used to take it with him all the time to, purify any negativities that he may have created from accidentally killing, creatures as he walked on the ground. So this really shows how careful he was, with his moral practice. So now a bit about, also one other point actually, talking about the Vinaya, I think it's also really important to look at the intention that the Buddha had when creating this monastic code, right? So all of the kind of rules, monastic rules, arose from different events that happened in the Buddha's life, and he noticed, okay, this is probably isn't the right way to do it, and then he kind of gave advice on what would be the better way to do it. And I think there are also, especially for monastics these days, to consider that there are probably things in our age that may not have been there in the Buddha's time, but we should still be careful about, right? So, for example, these days we have mobile phones and technology. So what is the kind of appropriate use for monastics to use, mobile phones and technology, right? So these are things that, even though it's not explicitly there in the Vinaya, I think it's very important for all of us, right? Monastics and lay people to really, especially if we want to practice spiritual practice, so how do we use technology effectively without distracting us, but also helping us on the path. So I want to talk a little bit about, when Atisa came to Tibet and his influence into ethical practice in Tibet, right? So in terms of the beginning of the monastic order in Tibet, so initially it was during the reign of the 38th king Trisong Detsen that the Vinaya tradition of Mula Shrivastivada was introduced by Acharya Sankarakshita. And however, this bhikshu ordination lineage from Sankarakshita was nearly lost with King Langdharma's repression of Buddhism at the end of the 9th or beginning of the 10th century. And along with the surviving Mula Shrivastivada bhikshus, and as well as the help of two Chinese Dharmaguptaka bhikshus, they revitalized this ordination lineage with the ordination of Gompa Rapsel in eastern Tibet. And this ordination lineage is known as the Lower Tibet Vinaya tradition. And in Western Tibet, the East Indian Pandit Dharmapala was invited to establish the second Mula Shrivastivada ordination line, and this line became known as the Upper Tibet Vinaya tradition. So Atisa himself was actually not a part of the Vinaya lineage from Tibet, the Mula Shrivastivada lineage. So he belonged to the Mahasamgika Vinaya lineage. And on the topic of Vinaya lineages, I would also like to delve into how the different Vinaya school lineages appeared emerged after the Buddha's parinirvana, right? Because during the Buddha's time, there was only one Vinaya school, right? That of the Buddha. So following the Buddha's parinirvana, minor variations gradually emerged from the Vinaya texts as they were transmitted to different regions, right? It should be noted that all of these different lineages, they emerge as they spread into different areas, right? So they do have slight differences. Currently, we have, at today's age, we have the Dharmaguptaka, Mahasravasivada, as well as the Pali lineage as well. And but nevertheless, when we look at the broader divergences in philosophical interpretation and religious practice, the Vinaya, across all traditions, you can see there's really a remarkable degree of textual and structural continuity as well. And I think it is also important as Buddhists in the 21st century for all of us to have equal equanimity for the different Vinaya schools. So, if we're part of one school, we may think my school is better than their school, but they may think, my school is better, right? So, but in actuality, when one's talking about, 18 or 20 schools, to say that one is right and the other is wrong is very difficult, right? So even the descriptor of King Kriken's dream mentions that all the ancient schools are the same and the true teachings of the Buddha. And in one sense, there is only one Vinaya, right? That of the Buddha. And the fact that the text was preserved with only minor differences across many countries over 2,500 years is quite extraordinary. And Atisa, Lord Atisa, was actually known to be someone who was very unbiased and non-sectarian on Vinaya tradition, and was said to be someone who was different from those other scholars of the time who may have had some bias towards a certain Vinaya school. So he dedicated himself to the study of the Vinayas of all four major traditions, as if they were the four angles of a square, without any bias for a particular school. And at that time, many schools existed in India, right? It's not like now where there's only a few. There were many, but Atisa was not a partisan. And it is for that reason that in the Kadampa tradition, they say that he took the whole teachings of the Buddha and recognized all 18 schools as being the correct and true words of the Buddha. So Atisa himself did not belong to the he did not belong to the existing lineage, right, Mula Sarvasivada tradition. So he did not establish a new ordination system in Tibet. So consequently, Tibet maintained the established Mula Sarvasivada Vinaya. So his contribution was actually, it wasn't by introducing a new Vinaya lineage, but actually through developing the Vinaya and ethical practice in Tibet through his own ethical practice as well as through his teachings, right? And so Atisa taught that ethics is an indispensable foundation for all higher realizations, including concentration, wisdom, and bodhicitta. And in his teachings, he taught that liberation depends on ethical self-discipline, and even advanced tantric practices must be grounded in ethical and Vinaya principles. So I'm just going to, just taking into consideration that we don't have much time, and I'll probably explain this a bit more detail in the paper when it comes out later, so you can have a look at it in the paper as well. But for now, I'm just going to give a final summary, and then if you have any further questions as well, we can talk about it later during lunchtime as well. So Atisa was renowned for his uncompromising adherence to moral discipline, regarding ethical purity as indispensable to authentic spiritual realization. His teachings and lived practice emphasize that ethical conduct is an indispensable foundation on the path of enlightenment. So among the numerous precepts governing monastic conduct, he was especially meticulous in his observance, refraining from transgressing even the most minor rules, right? Let alone those of greater gravity. And his conduct exemplified a scrupulous commitment to sila, moral discipline, rooted in the conviction that ethical integrity forms the indispensable basis for higher meditative and contemplative attainments. So Atisa's personal conduct exemplified rigorous ethical discipline, embodying the Buddha's emphasis that, that he stated, that the Vinaya shall be your teacher. So I really feel that Atisa genuinely practiced, this teaching in his life. And his unwavering commitment to Vinaya and ethical purity ensured the preservation of Buddhism's ethical foundation and established a model of disciplined, compassionate practice that continues to shape Tibetan monastic life to the present day. So in this way, his life embodied the real essence of a true spiritual practitioner through his qualities of discipline, humility, and compassion. And I hope that we can, really take some the essence of his practice, his ethical practice, regardless of whether we're monastics or lay community. I think we can all learn from how committed he was to practicing ethical practice and moral conduct, right? And which benefited himself, which benefited his community, and it benefited so many parts of the world as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Tenzin Lekzom, for this complete presentation on Vinaya, including the meaning of Vinaya in general, and especially how Atisa practiced the complete monastic discipline in a very strict sense, which is taken as the foundation of all qualities. So thank you for this wonderful presentation. and also more or less finishing in time. Our next presenter is Venerable Dhardo Tulku Rinpoche from Drepung Monastery.
Tosongsakie, Kasuyo Malyoba, Chibu Sumji, Lamdo Domze de Kanjun Tuden Pewe Tinjenje, Cho Atisa la Soadeus. To the Venerable Lord Atisa, who did not overlook even the subtlest point of the Buddha's profound and vast teachings, and who composed them into a path for the three capacities, to you who brought the Dharma to the land of snow, I offer this supplication. So this verse is composed by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, and it is included in the the supplication prayers of the 17th great Pandits of India. And today I'd like to say that I'm very honored to be able to participate in this very auspicious occasion of celebrating the life and legacy of the great master Atisa Dipankara Srijana. And the topic that I will be talking about is Vinaya and the Noble Eightfold Path, Atisa's vision of ethical living. So I think first, in order to understand what Vinaya really is, we need to sort of break it down and understand it in very simple way. So Vinaya, the word in Tibetan, Dulwa, which literally translates to, in English, taming the mind. And the Buddha himself said in his own words that taming the mind is good, and the tamed mind brings forth happiness. So here he is actually referring to the code of discipline, which is the foundational sort of base for achieving all the goodness and ultimately leading to liberation. So basically it's more like a systematic approach or a blueprint for enlightenment, if you talk in a sort of a very far sense. And if you talk in a closer sense, then it's can also mean achieving higher births and also achieving self-liberation. So again, we need to understand that when we talk about saying that taming the mind, the word mind, chit in Sanskrit, is a very sort of ambiguous word, because the mind is certainly not a single sort of entity, but it is formed out of different variations. And the mind is explained to be just like a river which flows constantly. And we can also experience the mind that when we try to identify the mind that we're identifying is actually the memory of the mind that was there. Because when we're actually experiencing the mind, it is too challenging for us to identify, because our minds are not settled and there are so many distractions. So in order to really identify the mind, we need a stabilized mind. And how do we achieve that? We achieve that with discipline, by restraining the mind. as the former speaker spoke about Tenzin Lekzom, that Atisa did not establish the Vinaya that he was practicing, or his lineage. It was the Mahasamgika, because Tibet had already established Vinaya by Shantarakshita few centuries ago before him. So, but Atisa, in his seminal text of Bodhipathe, Pradeep, or a lamp to the path to enlightenment, he really kind of specified, specifically thought about what Vinaya really is. And this was also later explained in the commentaries of the later Kadampa, Kargyu, and Sakyas Lamde, and also the Lamrim stages. So, in this way, we can understand that this Vinaya is the base for our spiritual growth and our spiritual happiness. And as I talked about, when we talk about taming the mind, we are actually talking about taming the 6 different kind of consciousness. Because the mind, in other words, is consciousness. And the 5 consciousness are actually based outwardly. It flows outwardly. Our eyesight consciousness, our sense of smell consciousness, our hearing consciousness, our sense of taste consciousness, and the physical sensation consciousness that we all possess are flowed outwardly. But the 6th mental consciousness, which in Tibetan we call it Trupa Yichi Namshe, is known as the mental consciousness. And that is the mind which we usually say, I think, he thinks, she thinks. That is the consciousness. And this is the consciousness that continues to sort of travel to the afterlife, if we believe in afterlife, or that sort of comes from the previous lives. And on this basis, Buddhism also sort of makes the logical reasoning that the mind, the previous life does exist and future life does exist, because the cause of that consciousness itself has to be somewhat similar, meaning that a tangible object or a rigid form of phenomena cannot be the primary cause of an untangible and such a subtle type of phenomena like the mind. So this kind of proves, as said by the great Indian master Dharmakirti in his Pramana, he used this reasoning as a base for proving that there is previous lives and there will be future lives. So going back on this, when we talk about by restraining the mind, we will achieve happiness, I think this kind of goes back into what Atisa taught in his Bodhipath Pradeep and also the Lamrim stages, where the ethical discipline or restraining the mind is the base where we are able to concentrate or achieve a stabilized mind, which can only see the ultimate reality, which is obscured by the 2 types of obscurations, or by our afflictive emotions that we have to endure daily. As Geshe Lhakdor talked about yesterday, we are all addicted. We are all addicted to our afflictive emotions, like anger, lust, ignorance, and so forth. And these afflictions obscure us from seeing the reality or gaining wisdom, pragyan. So the shield, which we are talking about, is the foundational sort of base for achieving samadhi, which is the stabilized mind, and from which only we will be able to see the truth, which is and gain pragyan, wisdom. And I think it is very important to incorporate the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path, and which can also, I think, be like a universal module for compassionate living or living with awareness, so to speak. So basically the Noble Eightfold Path is explained by the Buddha is first having the right view, and then from that having the right resolve, and then right speech, right course of action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So these are the 8 sort of Noble Eightfold Path which leads us into living compassionately or living with awareness or living the right life. And I think to understand the right view, I think it also depends on the Buddha's teaching of the Four Noble Truths, which gives you an idea of what is right and what is wrong. If you are confused or if you are delusional about the cause of good things as something afflictive, then we are wrong. We have a wrong view. And if we believe that from good causes it emerges bad results, then again we have the wrong view. So in order to clarify that, if you have a perfect understanding or the correct understanding of the Four Noble Truths, which is the foundational sort of teaching and the first and foremost teaching that the Buddha Shakyamuni gave to his 5 disciples in Sarnath, it is quintessential to understand this. And from this we can understand that having the right resolve is depending on the actual causes, the right causes to gain the right results. And having that sort of determination and that sort of commitment to our daily lives, putting that in is what the right resolve is. And the right speech is, of course, from this we have to abstain from speaking lies, from using divisive words, and also from engaging in idle chatter, so forth, which can again create sort of more afflictive emotions. So this is what right speech is. And the right course of action or the right action is basically about not engaging in the non sort of virtuous acts such as stealing, sexual misconduct, and then we also have killing. So these type of like violence and so forth, if we abstain from that, we are actually using the right course of action. And also, it also the mind which we use of being wrong, having the wrong view and so forth is also considered to be the sort of the right course of action. And then the right livelihood, I think, is something very important, especially to this generation, because the right livelihood actually means that we should live in the right way, have the sort of the living way or right way of living. And I think that is something that we are unable to do nowadays because of the way things are. Especially everything nowadays is a byproduct of capitalism, as you all know. And right livelihood means that we have to be able to differentiate what we need, our necessities. As Professor Samdong Rinpoche always said, we are all users. We use commodities as necessities, but we shouldn't be consumers. But everyone is designated as a consumer nowadays. So we shouldn't be consumers, because to consume means giving into lust and attachment, giving into excessive sort of behavior, debauchery. So that is something that we have to refrain from. That is something we have to abstain from. And this sort of understanding will ultimately lead us to the right way of living, right livelihood, although it is very challenging, because everywhere we see and all the influences that we get is from capitalism and so forth. So in order to do that, we have to start very early. And His Holiness has always said that the current modern education system that we have right now is inadequate. And we have to sort of incorporate ethics or universal ethics and morals or morality in it from a very young age for the younger generations, in order to have that kind of discipline and in order to break away from this constraint from the capitalism sets us into. So this is the way to, I believe that what Atisa taught as discipline, explained discipline is, and what the commentary so far from the alumni stages has taught us is that we need to have the right livelihood, we need to have the right effort. From this comes right effort. And following the right effort, we must have the right mindfulness, because again, we need to be able to practice the right sort of view or maintain that right view, and that is dependent on mindfulness and introspective awareness. And to be able to do that, we have to engage in the right concentration. The concentration which ultimately leads us to break away from this vicious cycle. The concentration which ultimately gives us higher births, and the concentration which ultimately leads us to wisdom or pragyan, and ultimately leads us to complete and full enlightenment. So, in summary, the concept of Atisa's Vinaya and the Noble Eightfold Path, as seen from my eyes, is the perfect module for the world to practice the correct way of living, the right way of living. It is not simply something doctrinative, but it is more like a universal knowledge and a universal understanding that everybody in their own capacities can practice every single day. And I feel like India has this responsibility, especially the younger generations, to carry on this legacy, because it is part of Indian knowledge too, and Indian culture too, which we have sort of long lost. And His Holiness really sort of emphasizes this in his fourth commitment, which is the revival of ancient Indian knowledge in this country, and which will, in time, spread all over the world, which I pray and wish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rinpoche. Milarepa said, I don't know this discipline or that discipline. If I know how to discipline my mind, that is called Vinaya or discipline. In which connection Rinpoche said, when we talk about disciplining the mind, there are so many varieties of the mind, including the six sense consciousnesses, which needs to be restrained. And what is even more important is to control the sixth mental consciousness, which is the controller of all other consciousnesses. And in order to do this, you need to have a thorough understanding of the way things are, including the Four Noble Truth. So thank you for this wonderful presentation. And our next presenter is Venerable Jamphel Tillin, Loselling Monastery.
Thanks for Geshe for kind introduction. So, my greeting to and respect to the most venerable Sangha members and to dear brothers and sisters. So before I start my presentation, I just want to recite the praise to the most venerable, the Master Atisa. I bow to the glorious Atisa who perfectly upholds the teaching of Buddha with pure discipline. Who perfectly upholds the teaching of Lord Buddha with pure discipline, untainted by the faults and flaws, expounded in the 4 sections of Vinaya Pitaka. So my topic here is the unified authority of scholar and deep Vinaya practitioner. So I just chose this topic because the Master Atisa is not just a scholar. He is a very deep practitioner of Vinaya, as we have discussed yesterday and this morning. So by unified, I just try to combine these two, scholarly and Vinaya practitioner. We have wisdom, and we have another side, this one, ethical. Both combining these two, one can fly with like both wings of what we call birds. So I choose this one. So my fellow speakers have speak mostly about what we call the importance of Vinaya and how he had practiced deeply, and so that profound practitioner. So that practitioner, or that his profound wisdom, won't come by automatic. So one must have to be a sincere and very deep practitioner and profound practitioner of Vinaya. So to my related topic, I just try to relate Master Atisa and the Vinaya by just how Vinaya come into and its origin and its types, and how Master Atisa possess all these 3, the perfect vows. So let me go through my first. So first is, what is Vinaya? So as Rinpoche mentioned, in Tibetan it means Dulwa. So Vinaya is a just Sanskrit word. So we can translate it to Tibet. Dulwa just to means to tame or to train one's mind. To tame and to guide and alternatively educate or to teach one's. So we can directly say a discipline with the code and conduct of monastic. So second, I have writing this way. Vinaya as, I just got some wrong here. I can say Vinaya as living Buddha and Dharma. So I try to relate this between. So Buddha taught the teachings and preached so much that to uplift the all sentient beings from the realm of suffering. So, and mostly he taught, says, about 84,000 discourses. That 84,000 is just a general topic. So there's somebody says it's a limited, somebody says it's 80,000. So he teaches this to lift up the sentient beings from the suffering and to give them the ultimate happiness. So with this, Buddha tried to preach to tame our mind, body, and speech. So like this way, we have Vinaya as the Dharma. And the Vinaya can be a living Buddha. As Master Atisa mentioned, when he was about to pass away, his disciple Domthempa asked, "Who shall be our guru when you pass away?" He just mentioned Trapitaka. We can say the 3 baskets. So when we say this way, how can be the Vinaya as a living Buddha? So we can get this way. Tripika is made of 3 subjects we call normally. So it's made of Sutra, Vinaya, Abhidharma. So we just have this one, Vinaya. And teaching of Buddha, the Vinaya is just base and foundation of all these things, the wisdom and this way. So I just tried to go through my third one, the origination of Vinaya. So we have to talk about Vinaya, we have to know about its origin and sources, how it came into being. So first I have this one, just gone through 84,000 discourses by Shakyamuni. And it was just condensed into 3 baskets. First we have Vinaya and Abhidharma and this one, Sutra. So that's for the origination. And 84,000 discourses are just, we have this number, and then all these are condensed into 2, the transmission Dharma and realization Dharma. So any teaching of Buddha can be brought into these 2 categories. The transmission Dharma and teaching that can be the teaching of scriptures is refers to the 3 baskets of scripture. So we have this one, first Vinaya Pitaka and Sutra Pitaka, Abhidharma Pitaka. The first Vinaya Pitaka means basket of monastic discipline. Sutra, we have basket of discourse. Abhidharma, the basket of higher doctrine. Just we have views and realizations that we have to. So for the third, we have here this one. What is the meaning higher means? Here higher just means the training that is higher than the ordinary, and that's view just as a superior. For that we have, first one we have this one, concentration, higher this one. And second we have this one, realization. These 3 realizations can be morality, concentration, and wisdom. So Vinaya is just basis of which contains the morality, Sutra, the concentration, Abhidharma, the wisdom. So we have then, there's lots of teachings of Buddha. So how it can be seen here, a living Buddha's teaching can be seen by us these days. So it was not just came into being, it was just hard works of 500 previous. We have this one, Arhats. They compiled after Buddha's passing away, 1 year after Buddha's passing away. So now we have this one, importance of Vinaya. Importance, we can say, Vinaya can be the foundation and root of all. We have this one, wisdom, and the base of all everything we have. So I just go be quicker. So we have this one, impact of Vinaya. So we have Vinaya can be traced back to Buddha's foundation teaching, which were designed to guide and conduct of his followers and maintain the purity of Sangha or monastic community. The Buddha's role in formulating the Vinaya was not based on abstract set of rules, but on practical situation that arose in the early community that monastic began to live together and interact with the larger society. Challenges regarding proper behavior, ethics, and discipline began to surface. These challenges were not only about individual morality, but also about the monastic community that could remain unified and spiritual focused. In response, the Buddha provided specific instruction to address these issues, often in the form of rules that arose from the real life situation. Then we have this one, Atisa as Vinaya master. For that we can say Master Atisa, for us in Tibet, for the purification of Dharma and revival of Dharma in Tibet, he was so much gratitude for Tibetans. And with this as his moral example, he just strict observance to the discipline and code of conduct of Vinaya. So before taking the vows of monastics, we just need renunciation, the worldly things. So we have this one, Atisa's renunciation. He was just born in a royal community and just choosing Dharma path and saw his palace as confinement. Then we have this ordination. He ordinated under the master Shila Rakshita, and his practice, and so sticking to the practice, he corrected even his smallest faults, avoid subtle cause of misdeeds. And the further thing is that he can integrate Tantra and the practice of Vinaya. With that, he can maintain pure vows. In the earlier Tibet, it's used to say that the Vinaya and Vajrayana practitioner can be like hot and cold water that can't be contained in one. So, but after his visit to Tibet, he just formed the way that everyone can easily flow the path that practice Vajrayana and Vinaya can be combined and flow as to attain the enlightenment. So after renunciation of all these things, he take monastic life. So relate to that, he first took how he take the 3 vows. At his young age, he used to say that he is a great Vajrayana practitioner. So we can say he was the great practitioner that at early age, he was a Vajrayana practitioner. With the mastering in Vajrayana, he just took the ordination and the monastic ordination. So he just have this 3 vows, Pratikmisha and Bodhisattva and Tantric vows. So we have I try to make the sequence of vows taking regarding a monastic or for the lay people. So generally we can say ethics, Bodhicitta and Vajrayana can be in general sequence, but there is a lot of debate among the scholars the true way the sequence can be prerequisites or anything that can be go before. So we have taken this way, ethics, Bodhicitta, Vajrayana. Ethics first, because we have taken the ethics or Vinaya as the foundation of everything. So first we can go with the Pratikmusha details. So monastic and lay divisions. For the Pratikmusha details, it's divided into 8. Somebody says it's 7. So Pratikmusha work can be into 8, and they can be monastic, and 5 for the monastic and 3 for the lay people. So it's just a temporary vow that ends up when one's pass away, because that vow based on the one's body. So when the person passes away, that body dissolves, and that the way that vow can be pass away. Second, we have Bodhisattva vows. So Bodhisattva vow is aspiration taken by some Mahayana Buddhists to achieve full Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. One who has taken the vow is normally known as Bodhisattva, a being walking towards the Buddhahood. This can be done when venerating all Buddha and by cultivating supreme and moral spiritual perfection to be placed in the service of others. In particularly, Bodhisattvas promise to practice the 6 perfections of giving, moral, discipline, passion, effort, concentration, and wisdom in order to fulfill the bodhicitta aim to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. So, just unlike the Pratigmusha vow, the Bodhisattva vow is more difficult to observe than the Pratigmusha because it requires continued maintenance of proper mental attitude. So it can be transmitted into future lives, unlike the Pratigmusha. So Master Atisa just stated, those who maintain any of 7 kinds of individual liberation have the ideal for the Bodhisattva vow, not others. Means that practitioners who took the Bodhisattva vows ideally have the laid foundation of ethical discipline by observing any of 7 classes of vows for individual liberation. So another way Master Atisa stated, without the vow of good engaged attention, perfect aspiration will not grow. Make effort definitely to take it since you want to wish for enlightenment to grow. So we have third the Vajrayana vow. And for these 3 vows, I just related with how Master Atisa possessed within his lifetime. So I just recited a verse that apprised the Master Atisa's acquiring these 3 perfect vows by Naksulotsava. I just try to read out. So first we have how Master Atisa possessed superior vows of individual liberation. As per Nakso's 80 verses of price, it says, I bow down to the LD order of text on discipline, supreme of monks possessing the glory of pure deeds, you having entered the door of here vehicle, a yak guide the ethical discipline as a yak guide its tail. A yak is so attached to the hair of its tail that when a single hair caught in the bush, it will risk its whole life to guide that no hair be loosed, even if it sees that it will be killed by a hunter. So we have taken this way, like way Master Atisa, after receiving the complete vows of monk, guided at the risk of his life every minor fundamental trainings, not to mention the major fundamental trainings which he was committed. So second, we have how Master Atisa possessed this one Bodhisattva vows. As per the Naksulotsava's 80 verses of price, it says, you having entered the door of perfect vehicle, develop the pure wholehearted resolve, and due to your spirit of enlightenment, you will not desert living beings. Bow down to you, intelligence and compassionate were. Thus it says that he trained in many instructions for developing the spirit of enlightenment, which is rooted in the love and compassion. In particularly relying on Lama Selingpa, he had trained for a long time in the supreme instruction of transmitted from Venerable Matriya and Asanga and Shantideva, respectively spending about 12 years taking the complete teaching of bodhicitta in presence of good Selimpa. He received the actual realization of bodhicitta. So third, we have this one, how Master Atisa possessed the vow of Vajrayana. As per Nakso's 80 verses of price, it says, having entered the door of Vajrayana, you saw yourself as a deity and possessed the Vajrayana mind. Lord of contemplation, Ayaduptita, I bow down to you with engaged in the secret conduct. Then Nakso expresses praise in the journal, calling the Master Atisa as a chief of yogis, due to his reaching the constitution of the stage of generation, in which he saw his body as a divine, and particularly with respect to his guiding properly the privilege and not transgressing the boundaries of the tantric rules. The 80 verses of Christ says, because of you had mindfulness and vigilance, you had no unethical thoughts, unconscious and alert with no deceit or pretension. You will not stand by the faults of infraction. So I just, within 1 minute, I just tried to, how Atisa gained his realization after upholding these all views. So Master Atisa observed the discipline was so pure that even from great distance, people can smell his fragrance of moral conduct. We have in Tibetan have saying that if someone upholds his ethical conducts in Vinaya, when he was passed away, there will be a fragrance, can smell, that can not an ordinary smell, can be within the one's realization. Then Atisa was not courageous in promoting and training ethical discipline, but also guided the ethical discipline by keeping his promise not to transgrading the boundaries of even rules. Even when he slightly transgressed, he immediately purified that infraction with the proper right. So last, I come with my conclusion. As Master Atisha's emphasized on Vinaya influenced the Tibetan Buddhism, which stressed the importance of monastic discipline and observance of Vinaya ethical codes. Himself as an excellent practitioner and guide and model for the monastic community, Master Atisha's legacy extends beyond his teaching, as he helped revival of Tibetan Buddhism and established Kadamba tradition in Tibet. With this, I come to my conclusion with the prayer to the one who perfectly taught the profound and extensive Dharma, guided the beings on the path of three types of individual, and great benefactor who spread the Buddha's teaching in the land of snow. I pray in gratitude. Sorry for this, my nervousness and all these things. First time here. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Jamphel Thinley. You started by saying that to become a great teacher, you should have scholarship, discipline, and what? 3. Scholarship, discipline, and conduct. 3 things must be needed. And then also he summarized the meaning of Vinaya, although he gave a detailed explanation by saying that when the Buddha was passing away and he was requested to appoint somebody as a representative, he did not appoint any one single person as his representative. He said, when I am gone, this is my representative, the teaching of Vinaya. Similarly, when Atisa was passing away, and the monks in a similar way requested him to appoint somebody as representative, he said, when I am gone, the 3 Pitakas are my representative. So the Buddha statement that Vinaya is my representative and Atisa statement 3 Pitakas are my representative do not contradict, because all these teachings are basically rooted in the foundational practice of Vinaya. So wonderful. Thank you so much for this presentation. And indeed, I would like to thank all the 3 panelists for finishing their presentation in time and making my life easier. Thank you. And then we move on to the question and answer session, before which I like to cite these 2 quotations from Atisha's Lemma for the Path to Enlightenment, where he says, from this moment onwards, until I attain enlightenment, I shall not harbor harmful thoughts, anger, avarice, or envy. Having cultivated bodhicitta, this is the promise he is making. And he is saying, I shall cultivate pure conduct, monastic or whatever, give up wrongdoing and desire, and with joy in the vow of discipline, train myself to follow the Buddhas. I shall not be eager to teach enlightenment in the quickest way, but shall stay behind till the very end for the sake of a single being. So he's saying that yes, achieving enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings is extremely important, but what is even more important is as soon as possible to address the problem of people. From that stance, I'm not in great hurry to become enlightenment. This looks like a contradictory, but if you work for the benefit of all sentient beings, that itself is a path to quicken, to achieve enlightenment. This is an amazing and wonderful statement. So now I invite some questions, especially some burning questions. When we say please ask question, please ask one question first of all. I attended many talks and teachings, and sometimes when it is question answer time, when we tell them ask just one question, they say, yes, I have one question, but two-pronged. so I don't want two-pronged one question. I just want one question. Just question. Okay, yes. Yes, sir. Here. So you can address to anybody or in general?
Anybody can. This word Vinaya, I think it was Vinaya Patrika was written by Tulsidas during the Ramayana. So do you think it is influenced or inspired by Tulsidas?
Could you explain what it means in this tradition?
Yes.
Is there can I just have a bit more information about?
Tulsidas had written Vinaya Patrika.
Right.
There was one representation of Vinaya Patrika.
Yeah.
So it is the same Vinaya or is it different?
No, different. No, these are all different, but in all different, practices, there is a discipline. So they may be using the same word, but it's a little bit talking different. There may be similarities also. Yeah. Next question.
Tashtile, and firstly, I would like to express my gratitude to the venerable monks and nuns present over here and the Sangha over here. My question is regarding the distinction between Tantra and Vinaya. So, venerable monks have talked about that how Vinaya and how Master Atisa went to Tibet during the time of later diffusion of Buddhism to Tibet and, sort of try to reinforce Vinaya practice. My question, and please correct me if I'm wrong, at the surface level, Vinaya practice, it sort of, in my opinion, like at surface level, embodies Zungzim. Like there's basically subject, like there's a dualistic nature that we see that, there's an like it's either there's something which is pure and something which is impure. So there is, on a surface level, dualistic nature of Vinaya. So my question is with regard to the mechanistic nature of how, with Vinaya practice, one can transcend and achieve nismed. In other words, non-dualistic, as to abandon non-dualistic fixation. So how does this transition happens with the use of Vinaya practice? Thank you. Tuchana.
So I'll just start and then maybe the others can also join. So I'll just share my perspective. So the Buddha taught many teachings to tame his disciples and to benefit beings. And there, we talk about the Buddha having 84,000 teachings, and there are many different types. So, Vinaya is a part of, trying to develop ethical discipline, and I guess a collection of the Buddha's teachings that are focused on discipline. And then when we look at Tantra, then that's another side, right, of the Buddha's teachings. So the Buddha had many teachings. He had teachings to develop concentration, to develop wisdom, shamatha, vipassana. And then there are teachings on Vinaya. There are teachings on, developing loving kindness, compassion. And then, so there are so many different types of teachings, right? And then, so I don't think we can say that Vinaya and Tantra are the same. They're quite different forms of teachings. But when we're practicing as an individual, right, it's all part of the same goal, right? It's all part of, Atisa talked about the gradual path, right? Trying to integrate all of these different parts of the Buddha's teachings into one kind of united form of practice. And so Vinaya mainly, it's focused on taming our body, speech and mind, looking at cause and effect, how our actions, first of all, affect our own selves and our creation of virtue and non-virtue and our future lives as well. And then also looking at how our practice relates to how we deal with community, right? And how we deal with the people around us. Because when we're practicing spiritual practice, it's not just for oneself. How we're dealing with others plays a big role as well. And then when you talked about non-dual practice and looking at pure and impure, then that is also related with tantric practice as well, right? So we're working with the winds and channels, and then really trying to bring everything on in our perception into the path. So I would say they're kind of two distinct parts of the Buddha's teachings, but as a practitioner, when we're practicing, we can bring them together.
If I may add my thoughts on this, my opinion is that I feel like just as Vinaya is inseparable from Bodhisattva vows or bodhicitta, practice of bodhicitta, it is the solid base for Tantrayana too. Because in order to practice Tantrayana, you have to have the insight or the realization of emptiness. And that is impossible without having a stabilized mind. And that goes back to the basic again. In order to achieve stabilized mind, without restraining your mind, body, speech, it is impossible to generate that. Because Atisa himself said in his seminal text, Bodhipata Pratip, that it is impossible to achieve, see reality without achieving a stabilized mind, which is solely dependent on discipline. So when you talk about non-duality, that is also there in Sutra. This actually comes from Chittamatra school of thought. And usually His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that when we are practicing Tantrayana, there is only two ways that we can practice. One is having the view of Chittamatra school of thought. Another is having the view of Madhyamika school of thought. Below that, usually, it is not commonly known. So in order to practice Tantrayana too, either you have to have this non-dualistic view and build on that, visualization and so forth. Or even, moreover better, you can have that concept of Prasangika school of thought, which sort of negates, every sort of intrinsic nature, right? So Vinaya is built upon that. And it is said that if you practice Vinaya without the three principles of the path, which is renunciation, bodhicitta, and the view of emptiness, then you will fall to the abysses, which is hell realms. But if you practice it with the incorporation of these three principles of the path, then you will be able to achieve liberation and enlightenment in a very short period, which will expedite the whole process. And that is why we are so fortunate to live in this era of having Tantrayana in this individual Buddha's, Shakyamuni's doctrine. It is said that out of the 1,000 Buddhas, there are only 2 Buddhas which this Tantrayana doctrine exists, and one is Shakyamuni.
Yes. Kishla, I will take one question. Because it's burning since yesterday, so it was during the Bodhicitta session, I think. So I think we'll ask it. So my question is to Rinpoche, who spoke in the last session, which is I think the Bodhicitta session. You have a deep search for why the journey to Indonesia, and you have a thesis for it. May I ask you if you would like to consider my antithesis? It merges the Bodhicitta concept with Shunyata and teachings of Shantideva, Nagarjuna, Atisa, and the concept of great compassion. Nagarjuna, for example, states that Shunyata is the absence of dependent origination. If this is the Bodhicitta, the difference between personal and geographical boundaries is removed. Gurus show this through their actions, so that questions that like you raised are resolved through its experience. Bodhicitta is an experience beyond words. It is an awareness which can be one explanation of chitta derived through the intellect or bodhi. An awareness of this interconnectedness of sentient beings, if extended to space and time, makes the desire to wait till the last sentient being gets liberated are natural thought. Your thoughts on this are welcome. So anyone, I think.
Last session.
Lhakdor la lenkyoro ati shira goycho maso.
Thank the first part of the question. What was it? It was a long question.
It's really a long question, but what is trying to say? What is the question now? Shall I read it again?
Yeah.
Yeah,
At least the beginning part.
So, Gila, basically what is asked is that
you
have...
can answer. You should answer.
I will read the question first. You have a deep search for why the journey to Indonesia, and you have a thesis for it. May I ask you if you would like to consider my antithesis? Now the question starts actually.
Yes.
It merges the bodhicitta concept with shunyata and teaching of Bodhisattva Shantideva, Arya Nagarjuna, Master Atisa, and the concept of great compassion. Arya Nagarjuna, for example, states that shunyata is the absence of dependent origination. If this is the bodhicitta, the difference between personal and geographical boundaries is removed. Gurus show this through their action, so that question like you raised are resolved through its experience. Bodhicitta is an experience beyond words. Then, if I may shorten the question, an awareness of this interconnectedness of sentient being, if extended to space and time, makes the desire to wait till the last sentient being gets liberation a natural thought. Your thoughts on this are welcome. So basically, what are your thoughts on it?
First of all, I would not consider this as an antithesis. There is a slight misunderstanding between the shunyata and bodhicitta. Absence of independent existence is not bodhicitta. So there is a confusion there. Bodhicitta is wish to become Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. Shunyata, as you rightly mentioned, is absence of independent inherent existence. And these two understandings are like the two wings of the bird that help you soar into the space of enlightenment. Right? So these two are completely different. And then the thought that is propagated from Lama Selingpa and others, primarily the bodhicitta. Now the real question is, because Lama Selingpa philosophically belongs to not the Prasangika Madhyamika. So philosophically, in terms of understanding of shunyata, there will be some differences. But there is no difference in terms of the cultivation of bodhicitta.
I just have a quick question. So all of the speakers mentioned how important of the the vows to Vinaya rules, things like that. But I just wanted to know the Atisa is to great thing for that, and why his chief disciple Domdom was not become monks or and other Milarebas, and is there special reason why the Domdom was never become monk or taking any roles, or are there any kind of like a special purpose he took certain sort of as a lay person still can do something for the rules and regulation, which is really Nagarjuna says it's a timni judami jusashin to yonde. So it's like the ethical contact rule is like ground. Without grounds, there's no going to further development. So what just about that? Could you tell us about any reason?
I do not have a very clear and historical based insight on this, why Domtimpa didn't take the vows, full ordination vows. But I believe that somehow within his own capacity, that he had a much more a potential to to being a disciple of Atisa and to be able to spread the Dharma. So I feel if anybody has any insight on this, anybody is welcome to share, right? But I think it might be an individual choice, or it might be that he was not sort of destined to be, and in some cases it is that if he takes the how do you say, the vessel of being a Gengyen, right? Then Upasak, then he might have more potential to spread the Dharma and benefit countless beings in this way. So
here, what is important is make a distinction between discipline and monastic discipline. Discipline in general is very important for everybody, lay person or monastic person. That's one thing, we have to make it very clear. So in terms of observing the discipline of the Upasaka, Atisa was said to be so strict that actually he is better observance of the discipline than a monk or a nun. Because sometimes it's very easy to take the so-called monastic vow, but very easy to fracture it, to destroy it, So therefore, that's one reason. And the second reason was Atisa, who is said to be the manifestation of Avalokiteshvara, he made a vow that to be able to benefit more people, so to make myself accessible to more people, I'll remain in the form of a lay person. So whenever any family, any individual members of the family, they have a problem, even in the mid of night, they can come and say, Atisa, please come. Domtompa, please come. And that approach is not so easy with the monastery. So these days also there are some Western other monks who get disrobed and then they say it's easier for us. That may be an excuse, but I'm not so sure. But in the case of Domtompa, he was really intentionally to benefit more sentient beings. He remained in that layperson's form. So okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add one thing.
Okay, yeah, please.
To this answer, can it be also that because Domtompa, because in those time in Tibet, there was a Mul Sarvastivada lineage already spread, and there was monastics in that tradition, whereas Lama Atisa was following the Mahasangika Vinaya lineage. And there are accounts of Domtompa discussing or even suggesting his teacher not to ordain monks in the different lineage because of the already existing Vinaya tradition that was followed in that region.
Yes, very good answer. Yes.
I just wanted to add one more thing, just also what our colleagues have already mentioned. I think it's difficult to know exactly what Domtompa's intention was as a very, ordinary being. It's very difficult to know exactly what his intention was. But I do want to emphasize that, in the Buddha's teachings, it is, very clear, and we see from many examples that lay people can attain, the same attainments of liberation and enlightenment as monastics. So they have the same potential. And you do not have to be ordained in order to attain enlightenment. And and maybe also a doubt or a counter question that arises, and we can maybe discuss it later, is, if the person can attain, enlightenment, a lay person, then they attain the perfection of ethics as well, right? So their practice would be, we say the Buddha, how the Buddha practices the Vinaya is perfect because he has attained the perfection of wisdom. So a lay person's practice would also be equivalent. I wouldn't say they'd have the ordination, but their practice would be equivalent to, in terms of their ethical practice would be the same.
I just want to add a last thing to what Venerable Lhakdor said. If Jovoje Paldinatisha was an emanation of Buddha Amitabh, and Domtompa was an emanation of Chenrezig, and they go in this pairing, because he even takes all these emanation forms to help him when he's making the journey to India, right? So their level is completely different. And I would agree that when people, in today's modern world, it's much more likely to meet people even on YouTube and in person who feel that not just monastic discipline, but discipline in general is not at all that important. Yeah. I think it's so nice that this panel has done a brilliant job. Thank you.
Okay, last question. From me, not anybody. From me.
From me. Oh.
Do you want to have your lunch? Then let us break.